Are we going to start now?
Yes.
Okay. Um, I think that it's time to talk about how important it is to pay attention to and to be sensitive to learn from, to recognize, to perceive, to, acknowledge, yes, but mostly it's about attending to the context in which an idea comes into your life, and to recognize that the idea and you are both changed in your merging contexts.
Mm.
Okay, so it matters where it came from, and it matters who you are at the time that you actually receive that idea or those words,
Yeah.
right? All of that is part of basic, what is, called second order cybernetics of observing the observer. It's about,
A bit more about that.
yeah, well, it's about relational information. It's about recognizing there is a relationship between the observer and the perceptions.
Mm.
Okay, I did not say that which is being observed, because I'm not quite sure how to draw those lines there. They're probably false, but I guess I'm speaking to this from this angle because I'm trying to get started on what I believe to be a really important conversation about how to tend to the relationships of the future,
Pretty much.
without getting caught in the binary of, are we talking about ownership of ideas or are we talking about open space?
Open source.
Okay, open source, yes. And we're not talking about either of those things. As far as I'm concerned, they're both the wrong question.
Mm.
I'm not interested in ownership of ideas, and I'm not interested in open source.
Mm.
I'm
Or,
in,
or acknowledgement or recognition, or it's kind of not quite, it kind of misses the piece. Yeah.
it's not really about the citation. Okay, so the bigger question is, what is your relationship to an idea or a phrase or a something, some information, and how did it come into you, and how is it coming through you?
Mm.
And that matters to what the information actually is.
I.e., maybe we can talk a bit about kind of recent experiences that are triggering this conversation, like being in the space of culture and ideas, and putting, it's difficult to be working in a space where the products of your work and whatever that is, sacrifices you make, the difficult decisions you make, the risks you take for what you believe is important, what comes out of that is intangible, but it's still valuable. And that is I think as someone who left academia, it's difficult to understand how it works, how the kind of marketplace of ideas works outside of academia. And I guess that's what we're kind of talking about, that academia itself is very toxic in terms of like peer review and the kind of stories where somebody submits a paper with an idea that they've been working on for years, and then somebody is on the peer review panel who steals the idea, rejects the paper, and then publishes it like 2 months later. And it's like that is not an uncommon story. So it's not like, that's why it's kind of an artificial division between like academia, not academia, or recognition, not recognition, whatever it is. It's like, are you tending the relationships around this ecology of ideas and culture? And if we change culture, how can we change culture in a way where we're enacting a crappy culture in how we're creating a new culture, right?
Right, and I think I have been really hurt and frustrated by that happening. You say something in a podcast and it turns up in someone's essay, and I can't even tell you how many times that's happened. Or, even the teachings in my warm data courses, where I very specifically say to my own, groups, please be really careful with this information, um, because it's taken generations. And if you just harvest the meme and plop it in your paragraphs without any of the depth, the words lose their meaning.
Mm.
And they don't have all of the years, and the work behind them is becomes very difficult to pull back out from the ground again and find those words, and to continue to excavate. um, so I guess it's partially this feeling that we live in a world in which it's the going thing that that someone can steal your work at any point, and probably they have, and therefore you can steal other people's work.
Mm. And
And
actually, ideas don't belong to anyone.
yeah, they're just in the interdependency. And how can you ever know the real origins of an idea? Not the point. That is not the point,
Mm.
right? The point is, how did you meet that idea? Who are you in that moment? And where did it come from?
How did that happen? How did it kind of ferment in you?
What's the warm data around how this idea came into your world?
Mm.
And it really makes a big difference.
Let's talk about
Because
Darwin. Darwin and Wallace.
Darwin.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, um, just that's an old story, but it's that story of Darwin and his friend Wallace. And, Wallace was far away on an island, bitten by a malaria mosquito deep in the dark visions of a fever, and had a lot of ideas and sent them to his friend. The post took a long time. His friend published those ideas, restructured them a little bit. By the time Wallace got back, there was an issue. So what Wallace saw in those ideas and what Charles saw in those ideas were not the same. And the person who published it imbued that same essence of competitiveness, of the right to take into the theories of evolution.
Mm.
The right to take. And I think for me, that's really at the heart here of what I'm feeling, is just this heartbreak around how can we be talking about making change or creating anything better in this world if we can't even stop taking voice from each other, taking the deep minerals
Mm.
of the work, and that's the piece where I just, it's not about credit or fame or employment or career or ambition for me. But I feel that because it's about that for other people, anything's game.
Yeah.
Everything's for sale. You put it out there, it's mine for the taking. You're a public person, you asked for it. It's like, wait a minute, what world are we living in?
Yeah.
What world? How
Well,
will we
yeah.
tend, the tiny relationships of the future? Because that's what makes a future, is those tiny relationships.
Hmm. And I've said this quite a lot of times before, like if you think about how small the group of people in the world who have uh, the resources and privilege and desire to try and change the system for the better, it's very, very small. It's a very small number of people who, I think there are many people who want to create systems of justice, equality, kindness, betterness, but the number of people who have access to decision-making power and funding and these things, it's really small. And it's really crazy that people are willing to just like ignore adjacent work, or just steal and take out of context. Like, it's really inefficient when you think about like an ecology or evolution. Like, we could be building and weaving with acknowledgement and building on each other's work, and it could really be additive. And sometimes it just feels like a massive waste of time when you have someone who spends 50 years developing a piece of work that's really, really deep, and then people like take that work out of context, don't always even have the full understanding of that work because they haven't learned from that person. They didn't do it, they didn't read all the books, they've caught a little bit of it, and they're like, great, I'm gonna use that. And it's I just think there's it's the question you were asking, what kind of future does that make, the kind of capitalist version of idea market of just like take the idea, like change it, sell it, and the people who have access to funding are the people who basically get to implement ideas. Like, no, what about that? Like, how do we actually work together with the knowledge of where our strengths and ideas and what we've spent a lot of time working on and what that person's spent a lot of time working on. I don't know how we get there, but it does feel like a kind of free for all. And I've also heard sometimes the argument like of somebody's got a better position or opportunity, or like, that this person's the right person to do this work kind of argument. So I'm interested what you think about that.
Well, I guess what I'm thinking of is this cool word of my dad's, schismogenesis, which is about how systems fall apart. Okay, you don't have to remember the word, but the meaning is important because it's about how relationships become non-vitalized. They become intolerable. And essentially, when you look at the what's happening with the human societies in this relationship to other human societies and the natural world, we are in a rapid state of devitalizing. So there are lots of different processes to talk about with this notion of how systems fall apart, but there's only one that I want to bring up here today, and it's this idea of systems holdback. Mm-hmm. And systems holdback is when I don't give what I could give because I see that you're not giving what you could give. So then you don't give what you could give because you see that I'm not giving what I could give.
Yeah.
All right. Now, if we have a moment in evolution where the deep, the deep thinking, the deep epistemological frames, the way of perceiving the ideas about who we are and the world we're in, the ideas need to be shifting in order for us to live in another way. Mm. And part of the paradox is that it's not okay. It's to share ideas. We're all in a state of systems holdback. The logic of this era is don't share your work. Yeah. If you value it and you want to be employed and you want to, have any say at all, don't share your work freely. Get paid for it, trademark it, protect it, or give it away and it's open source.
Yeah, it's basically one or the other.
And what I'm saying is that I was speaking with my friend and colleague Yaran the other day, and he was saying, we were in a conversation, he was saying, all these people in this conversation are brilliant. Every time we have a conversation, they start citing other people and quoting, and they're basically showing each other how much they know. And he said, I'm bored. What I want to do is think together. I want to go into that next place where we aren't needing to, keep posturing.
But wait, the citing is good. Citing can be good.
Citing's not the problem here. The problem is there's not a conversation. So what I just did in that description is that I actually said where that experience came from. Okay, you don't know who Euron is. That's not a citation that has any kind of thing you could go look up. It's not about that. It's about you just saw me do the thing of saying, this is not my idea. I saw this in a friend and I appreciated it. And this is what I saw in it.
Hmm.
Right. So that's the thing, is that it doesn't matter whether you got an inspiration from the garden or the dog or your kids or, some old dead author or, or your own,
Ponderings.
yeah, like it doesn't matter. Sometimes it's your own journal notes and you go back and you see that you are different,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that difference matters, right? It makes a real difference as to what those ideas are, who they land in, how they're perceived. The ideas are not just ideas. They have context. And I guess for me, I don't see how we go forward
Mm.
without heightening sensitivity to the context in which ideas are found, expressed, shared, and that means that they're not opportunities. An idea is not an opportunity; it's a possibility. And possibilities are shared. They're created. They're all this talk about community and collaboration, and you can't even have a conversation without something getting stolen. What kind of garden is that going to be for the community? What kind of collaborative spirit is that?
Mm. Well, I think something like open source doesn't work in capitalism. I don't understand how how it's kind of like creating a little fake garden of utopia in a total dystopia, and then being surprised. Like, I think we keep running into this argument whenever we post about this topic on Twitter, which is like, ideas don't belong to anyone. Let's just share it all. It's a free for all. Like, let's be open, and I'm not attached to ideas. And the problem is that we live in a society where actually an idea can be trademarked and turned into money. Like, we don't live in a society where everything's just equal. It's all like free for all, and we're just all happily thinking along together. Someone can take bodies of work. You can take somebody's podcast rambling and turn it into an article and get paid for it, and you can build reputation, and then that reputation gets you a position. And it's everything is about recognition, position, access to funding, and it's a big competitive mess for those things. And that, to me, is the problem. That's the part that's the problem, which is obviously pretty difficult to change. I mean, this whole industry of thought leadership of like, you have an idea, you choose your domain, you write your book, you're only allowed one domain. Like, you can't have two. You can't be a complex person. Like,
Right.
God forbid. You have to be like, the climate change woman, or like, okay, you can be the loneliness woman, but it's like, you can't be just you. That doesn't work. So you have to choose your domain, and then you do your TED talk, and then you've got the book, and then you've got the website, and you're like, this is me. You can't take this because this is now officially me. And now there's like all of this, like that kind of protects you. But that like also isn't very good for the ecology of ideas. It's like,
No,
who's
I
that
mean,
helping apart from you? Like,
no one. No
and
one. And
I bet you, just to say, I bet you most of the people who are the most vigorously competitive and like dogged with this kind of grabbing behavior are probably the people who have also gone through the biggest pain of that process of like, they probably lived through years and years and years of having their ideas stolen, you know, like not having access to funding. Like you know, you meet people who have been through the battle, and then that's how they end up pissed and mean and cold.
Yeah. I mean, what this is back to, that group of people that, are we going to show each other how much we know, or are we going to think together? Are we holding back because it's the only safe thing to do? But it's not safe to hold back. It's not safe to hold back ideas in this moment. That's the least safe thing that we can do,
Mm.
is actually hold back from thinking together. And, I how do you justify, all those things that you just said, Phoebe, that, you got to get your job, your TED Talk, your all of that stuff is so last system.
I'm still waiting for your warm data TED Talk, Nora.
I don't know. Um,
Please don't go
if,
there.
uh, but all of that stuff is valuable in a system that is the system that's actually killing us.
Hmm.
So the where ideas sit in a new way of holding life really matters. How we tend to them in relationship to each other and their context really matters. And it's not just about what kind of journalism ethics you learned at school or citation ethics. It isn't that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because that we wouldn't be able to have a little set of guidelines and we could follow them. This is far beyond that. This is saying, actually, where did you find this?
Well,
What does it mean to you?
it's about being attentive, like all the time, and like it's hard. Like I find myself developing that attentiveness where I'm like, there have been moments where I've posted something and afterwards been like, huh, I wonder how that felt for that person who I had that conversation with, where that came from, and I'm becoming more careful. But it's a practice. It takes attention, and there's no incentive to do it apart from relationship, because if you care about the relationship, then you think like, huh, you know, that person might read this and be like, oh, bad taste in my mouth.
Yeah, and who does she think she is?
Right.
And why would she do that? And why would she not call me first?
Hmm.
And why would we not discuss it? And why would she not just say, I heard this from this person?
Hmm. Or when I was
And
talking to, you know, XYZ.
yeah, or this, whatever it is, it's just recognizing that ideas are not, freely hanging in the air. They're actually in relationship and in interrelationship. And when you join with an idea, the conditions in which the idea came to be and the conditions in which you came to meet that idea meet.
Hmm.
Okay, that's a significant meeting.
What about,
And
is there space for ideas that do get, like, I guess what I want to bring in is like, we are constantly composting information. And then sometimes like ideas grow out of that compost. And you can't say, you know, that came from that conversation or that came from here. They ferment, and through all of your experiences and your pain and inspiration and story and, you know, the culture of your mother and whatever else, like that all jumbles together and you come up with stuff.
mm-hmm.
I mean, sometimes it's very easy to say, oh, look, that person heard that there and now they're publishing it here. Well, that's kind of gross. Come on. But
Mm-hmm.
I just want to bring in that, you know, there are, what about those ideas that come from your own process?
I mean, I guess I would have to just ask, where's the edge of you? At some point it is about shifting to a different way of living, in which that stops being some extravagantly onerous process of attending and starts to just be natural. I think that we're just not really paying attention to. And because we've lived in a world in which it was catch as catch can, what you got, are you a content creator or aren't you? You got to produce something once a week. You got to get, you got to get your stuff out there. You tend to your brand, whatever that is. And as long as the ideas that are in the compost now around how we're going to live together differently in the future, as long as those are brandable, they're not actually going to grow. And if they do grow, they're going to grow in a system that's the system we're trying to get out of.
Yeah, they're going to grow into a story of biology and evolution, which says that life is built on competition, that then leads to destructive, earth destroying capitalism that leads to potentially the end of the human race.
Yeah. And I don't think that this is non-trivial. I think that this is actually really important to think about in terms of what it is to what it is to care about what happens in the future. It's really at that level.
Mm.
I often quote that movie Slumdog Millionaire because I think they tapped into this beautifully, of all those things that character somehow knew, but he didn't know them because he went to get a formal education.
Mm.
He knew those things from a lot of weird, random, complex happenings in his life. And um that mattered. So especially right now when we're seeing statues of colonial slave traders fall, and there's a heightened awareness and attentiveness to the ways in which the colonial capitalistic um, controlling mechanistic mindset has produced ways of being and behaving that create blind spots. Particularly in this moment is a moment to bring this up
Mm.
and say there are so many voices that are being taken because they can be. And because there's a logic that says if you can take it and it's a good idea, you should take it. And if you can make it go further, well, you're just doing that person a favor.
Yeah,
Okay?
that's the thing.
That is so toxic. If you think somebody has a great idea and you have platform, make space for them, bring them in, be in conversation with them, let it bloom, right? Like be there in the relationship. Call that poet, find that person, connect. It is the relationship.
Mm.
The idea is the relationship. You harvest it, you plaster it all over the place, you killed it. You didn't give it life. You sold it, and that cannot be where we're going.
Mm. I think the fear often in those situations though is that you invite you invite that person, and then there's a fear underneath that. There's this kind of fear driving, like there's not enough. We've talked about it. There's a scarcity of voice. That that is a real driving force in a lot of people, especially women who have not had voice for, a very long time. It's been quite recent. And I notice probably more competitiveness amongst women um, in the kind of thought leader, culture, leadership space. And that is very real. comes from a place of, being screwed over.
Yeah, and there's a special place in hell, I think, for women who steal ideas from other women. I recognize the jealousy, right? There's a kind of jealousy that if someone has a great idea, there's a, I wish that was my idea. I wish I thought of that. I did kind of think that. I
I was
mean,
thinking it.
see, I was thinking that all along.
I,
I've always thought that.
I actually always did think that.
Yeah. I mean, in fact, you could look in the past and you could get older sources of people that she probably got that from.
Right.
So
Actually,
it's okay.
it's been thought all along by everyone. Like, actually.
So I'm going to write about it.
Right.
And in that moment, something poisonous happened.
Yeah. Goes awry.
Where something beautiful could have happened.
Okay, so let's play that out. What would that look like as a beautiful thing?
That looks like, wow, that was a really great idea. I loved what you said or what you wrote. I would love to write something about that. Would you like to contribute to that?
Could we write it together?
Could we write it together? Would you mind looking at these ideas with me? Would you like to give a quote or even what it looks like is writing about something and saying, I experienced this thing and I was inspired. And it's hard for me to tell what of this is my ideas and what of this is her ideas. Or whatever that is. But just whatever's real, just do that real thing.
Mm.
You know what it is.
You know.
You were there.
Yeah.
You know when you're
I know.
when you're not being cool. Like, there's not really.
You do know when you're not being cool.
You know.
Yeah. Totally know. Yeah. I know we said we need to talk for 30 minutes, but I still want to bring up, there's still a couple things on my mind.
Okay, go.
One of them is kind of the world of artists. Like, I feel like, having dipped into the world of art and artistry, like that is a really cutthroat, that's where it can get really, really razor sharp, because it's like people's entire, if you're an artist, you're kind of in this process of creating and becoming who you feel you are on a journey of becoming, and that's about expression. And if you say, what if you're in your, I just want to kind of play out some questions of like, what if you're in your process of finding the words for what you are expressing your essence to be, which I think I would say many artists kind of are doing, and then you hear someone else talk and it triggers something in you, and it moves bits around in you, and you're like, I have better language for the thing that I am. Like, I think this is really real. This is the sense of like, but if I say that, this came from that person, I won't get to express my essence, because then it'll be them. Like, there's also this, I'm trying to kind of put words on some of what really is happening in that moment of people not attributing, not crediting, and that kind of thing. And I think a world where every time an idea or area is kind of cordoned off as like, well, you can't go there anymore, or like, she's now doing Peruvian, like indigenous, resist, like, you can't do that, you can't touch that, and it slowly becomes this like, you can't, that also doesn't feel good.
Again, I think we just have to look at what's the appetite that has been developed over the past few hundred years. And it's an appetite for, you can find it anywhere. It's an appetite for quick fix ideas. It's an appetite for really not a lot of depth. It's an appetite for,
it's fun.
A lot of publishers will even say to people, please don't go to the trouble of, citing and telling a story of where you got, because there's just, it's just not entertaining. It's not fast enough. We need it to be faster. So just get to the point, get the idea, get the meme. The meme can only be up to 20 words. So you don't really have any time to talk about the context. Just say it,
Yeah.
If someone's interested, they can do their own research. And so I think part of what we're talking about is actually developing a taste for um, for something that has its story with it, for the warm data to be intact, developing that piece where it's, when I hear someone say, and this, I was, inspired by this work from this person and then this person, and then I, felt this, da, da, da. For me, that is the richness. It adds so much to the work. And without it, I kind of wonder why it's being hidden. Why are we hiding that information?
Mm.
And so I guess that's part of it for me, is the development of that kind of expectation of that warm data being there.
Mm.
And like when you taste a soup and you're not a chef, you just eat the soup and you're like, it's yummy, it's not yummy. If
Right.
you taste the soup as a chef, you have a heightened sensitivity to all the things that are happening in that soup. And you might say, there's a little bit of cinnamon, and I feel that there's a heavy cream, and you can taste alongside that fresh sorrel the complementary flavors that are put into a particular alchemy, right? An
Yeah.
idea is like that. It has soup. And the or music or
Right.
film. Certainly people in the arts are tuned to the particular details of an art form. But really, a lot of us could be a lot more tuned to a lot more.
Well, yeah.
So there's a kind of laziness here.
Well, what
That
you're also calling for is going deeper. Like, I feel like it's a call for going slower and deeper. Like, that would solve quite a lot of this. Like, yes, it is okay to be influenced and hear something and sit with it and digest it and connect it together with all of your warm data, like inside you. Like, if you tell me something and then I publish it the next day, obviously it's going to be basically Nora republished with my name, which feels pretty icky. But if you tell me something and I sit with it and I like mull on it and we talk about it and I connect it to different things and I, and it kind of becomes part of me, and then I think things and I publish things, and obviously it's imbued, but that's also where you acknowledge, like when you write a book, there's always acknowledgements, because everyone knows it's bullshit that one person writes a book. It's always like 20 people who have actually written the book. But
and it becomes an exploration of that ecology of relationship and ideas.
right. And when I read about Gregory Bateson, it's not really like, even when I read about your dad's history, and actually when you talk about him, you always talk about McLuhan and like these other thinkers who were co-thinking, because it's not even, you're willing to even say it's not just your dad who came up with the stuff he wrote about. It's the crew, it's the ecology, it's like the milieu of that time, and that thinking and the music that was playing at that time, and the art and the movement, and right, like it's
the politics and the right, all of that was part of where those ideas found a place to land, found a place to be born, right? So how do we make space for that? Because I think in the process of being slower and deeper, what there actually is the potential of moving much faster into new thinking,
right.
collective new thinking, right? And right now everyone's like, oh yeah, collective intelligence and collaboration, but it is not going to happen if everybody's hoarding their little specialized corner. It's not going to happen.
Or shoving like furniture around on the Titanic, like, right, that's what it's like, the moving the furniture around, where it's just like, it's like, okay, you had this idea, it's this one, and moving around, republish and stealing it, get some funding, woo. It's like, has anything really happened? Like, I think that's also something I've heard, who was it, on a podcast with Brett Weinstein and somebody else. He was interviewing someone, and they talked about how in terms of technology, the actual progress technologically has slowed down because there's so much like small innovation happening quickly, and we feel like we're on the edge of this wave that's constantly crashing, and it's like the most innovative time ever. But actually, like, what is like deeply changed over the last like 10-20 years? Like, there's something about that going slowly to take massive strides that you can't take when you're doing tons of tiny little steps.
And when people are in systems holdback, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
And I know that there are days, today was one of them, and you had one just the other day, where I just feel like, no, I actually, all the ideas and all of the effort that I put out there is just taken and metabolized into this other system, and it's just taken.
Mm.
And it's taken with a kind of hunger for attention, for it's an ambition. I mean, increasingly I just feel
Ambition.
how toxic ambition is
Mm.
to the growing of a new way of thinking together. A new ecology of ideas is you know, ambition is the Roundup pesticide that's killing the soil of,
Good.
of the new ecology of ideas. It is, because the ambition pulls it all back into existing system.
Mm. Gross.
It's gross. That's what we say.
It's gross.
It's gross. Should
I've
we end?
noticed people do have started using the word icky quite a lot. It's icky.
Icky's good. I'm good with icky.
Icky's great.
Yeah, I mean, other ideas are delicious. Yeah. So I think it's about being sensitive. You know, that thing you said a minute ago, Phoebe, about you put something out there and you're attentive that that person who it could hurt could read it.
Mm. But I think some people are very okay with that.
And that's a desensitized positioning. That comes with a justification process that leans into existing system, you know, rules and regulations of
Mm.
journalistic ethics. The rules and regulations of journalistic ethics do not hold for whatever it is we're going into. It's not nearly enough integrity, not even close. Look at fake news. Look at what's happened to journalism.
Yeah.
It didn't work. It wasn't enough. Okay, there wasn't enough warm data.
Yeah. Yeah.
There wasn't enough, and so people lost. They don't trust anything they read anymore. And
I
this
think,
is
yeah.
exactly why. Where did you get that idea? Why are you thinking that thought? Where are you coming from? All of that stuff that got sterilized out of the expression of an idea gave it the ecology of
Yeah.
information.
It's like in science where, you know, where the whole culture of science seems very broken in the lack of observing the observer, of like, you know, cutting the human out of the experiments and trying to remove it. But it's even more ridiculous to try and do that in culture, when culture obviously lives in humans, and whoever's writing that article is obviously going to massively influence the tone, the blind spots. You know, that article I just put out on Sensemaking, but like all of those things of like, who's telling the story, who, you know, what is their experience, and all of that stuff, which I guess is basically like, what's the warm data of you reading the story and the warm data of the person telling the story. That's really important for true sense making about what is real.
And if you are in the kind of attention that is on a hunt for content for your own stuff, that's the wrong kind of attention.
The hunt.
That's not, yeah, you know, people like, you know, they listen to podcasts, or they partake in a conference, and they're basically scanning
Wait, I have
for
a funny.
for content.
I just remembered a conversation with my friend John. Here's a little example of how to do this. I was talking to
Yeah.
my friend John, and he said, "Oh yes, the people who read books to win arguments." It's like, that's just such a great phrase, such a great way of putting it. But I don't want to demonize. Like, I don't want to shame or demonize those people. If anybody is watching this who feels as if, you know, this is directed at them, we've all been there. Like, we're in a toxic culture. And it's the work of deciding, actually, I'm just not going to be like that. I'm just not going to be uncool. And I'm not going to do that because actually it's last system. And if I'm truly trying to do this new system thing, it starts with how I behave to other people. It just does. Like, it's just like, you know, change the world, change yourself, that whole thing. It's real. I think it's pretty real.
Yeah, no, it's not about shaming, but it is about saying that's enough. It's enough now.
That's enough.
And that's enough. And quit trying to, all of us have to quit trying to hide behind the justifications
Mm,
that the past several decades have scripted for us.
yeah. And we've
Um,
all been
and
bruised by it. You know, like, if part of the justification is like, well, I've been screwed over, like, it's like, yes, like most of us have, especially if you're not a white man. Like, yes. And also, you know, and many of my white male friends also have been colonized, felt extracted, felt exploited, felt not heard, felt copied, felt stolen from. Like, we're all in this, but it only stops if we stop.
especially people who are working independently, it's a lot easier for people who have jobs to, have that salary and just be kind of culling and claiming and culling and claiming. And
Mm,
if you're an independent, there's that, and people steal your work, you don't have anything else.
yeah.
So it's also about not having the community. So if there's community in academia or in medicine or in law or in technology or in even in the arts, that community is there. If you're in the liminal space, if you're creating work in the in between, there's no one. There is no academy. There is no professional set of guidelines. And
There's a
so,
professional group of liminal spacers, but
well, that's my concern. I mean, I think that's why we're having this conversation, is that in particular, that group of people needs to
mm,
become increasingly sensitive to what it is to tend the liminal space. If you're going to be in the liminal space, you have to tend the liminal space. And that means that the second there's holdback, it dries up and blows away,
mm,
or it becomes a farce, which is
which is actually
we're
what
right
it's.
on the, yeah. And I feel like we're right on the edge of that. So it's, it's heartbreaking, actually.
Mm, it's enough.
Yeah. Good.
Good.
Did we